You won't believe it, but maybe you will believe it. Look, the cat's out the bag now, but another, let's say, prominent public health organization, if that's what you want to call it, government sponsored organization, has also come to terms with the idea that they had even jumped the gun on what happened earlier on in the pandemic. And this is why the whole term misinformation, disinformation is such a dangerous one. Because what it does is let's say this, let's backtrack. It's not about the idea itself of misinformation and disinformation. I guess maybe you can argue that's part of it. Let me fix this camera real quick. But it's not just that. It's about what is more so being classified as that. See, the problem and what we're dealing with here is that certain entities have deemed certain information automatically as misinformation and disinformation. And what's happened there is that people that were, even if they had proof, that were making arguments to the contrary, were immediately silenced by these, be it the YouTubes of the world, the Facebooks of the world, because, well, it was not something that was necessarily authorized by, let's say, the public health experts or these trusted entities who had objectively got it wrong on this topic on multiple instances and on multiple occasions. But this is why the free flow of information is so important, and you should be very, very skeptical of people who just who claim to be these platforms, for example, where people are able to freely exchange, but then they deem certain things that something like this just completely off limits. And that's what made what happened here so unique, because they said that this was off limits. And you look at something like YouTube, which YouTube grew. This is a platform. I've said this before. YouTube was a platform that grew off of wild theories. If you remember back in the glory days of YouTube, when it was actually YouTube, and you could go down this rabbit hole of people coming up with these like conspiracy theories from aliens on down. And that shit was fascinating. 9/11. You could make video after video after video, basically going against the grain of what the official government narrative was for 9/11. And there was no sort of, oh, we're spreading misinformation, though you're going completely to the opposite of what they said happened. You're spreading misinformation. You're spreading disinformation. You could talk about all of that stuff and it was all good. But for whatever reason, and this is why this is especially something that we should never forget and never stop paying attention to. Never let them make it on this. For some information, for some reason, when it came to this virus, all that went out the window. Even with previous viruses, you could talk freely about all that. It didn't matter what it was, Ebola, swine flu, all that stuff. There was never any sort of idea that there was, like, you couldn't say something. Now, when this came up, COVID-19, they said, well, you can't even damn talk about it without getting completely removed from the damn platform. Even doctors, public health experts that were saying things that were not public health experts, meaning they were experts, but they didn't work for the damn government, who were saying things to the that was anti-that. You remember Dr. Erickson out of California? I'm talking completely took down all his videos on multiple platforms. Why is that? And this is a topic that we're going to go in. I know there's a long intro right there, but I had to set the scene because we have another example of this right here. And the title states, and this is coming from PBS themselves. WHO chief says it was premature to rule out COVID lab leak. Now I want to set the scene here again for this topic. Early on in the pandemic, it was suggested that not only there was a potential lab leak, but that was kind of reassuring or reaffirming the idea that this was not some natural occurrence that came from animals, right? A lot of people had their theories, even, of course, the former president of the United States. And I think because it came from him, okay, it had to be dismissed immediately. Now, after a year and some change, even the WHO, this is the one platform. So if you guys wonder how I get away with saying some of the things that I say without getting my videos taken down, though I had 2 strikes, albeit they've been removed because I raise hell. This is the one organization, the World Health Organization. If you go to YouTube's rules themselves that they named, that you can't, that they say you can't go against, well, the WHO themselves has conceded this point, completely rejecting the idea that there was a lab leak was a fucking mistake. And the WHO chief himself says it. As it states right here, the head of the WHO acknowledged it was premature to rule out a potential link between COVID-19 pandemic and a laboratory leak. And he said Thursday he is asking China to be more transparent as scientists search for the origins of the Modelo virus. In a rare departure from his usual deference to powerful countries, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, I'm just going to say General Tedros, because I don't even know how to say that shit, said getting access to raw data had been a challenge for the international team that traveled to China earlier this year to investigate the source of COVID-19. Oh, it's almost as if the Chinese government wasn't being completely honest about things. I don't know. It was just a long list of commentators, experts, even people that worked for your beloved government that was saying that you just said that they were quacks when they did say it. It's just amazing how the truth, and this is what, before I continue on, I do want to say this. I said it before. The truth is the truth, no matter if you are late to discover it. See, quite often we play this whole, what's the term? Let's say appealing to authority, where people think the truth actually rests upon the people that say it. So what happens is, if it doesn't come from them, then it can't be true. But what we have now is an instance where people, like, they stumbled across the information late, or rather they conceded the point late, even if they knew, which is even more dangerous. And then they'll say, well, the science changes or something like that changes. The people that suck the teeth of the state, that's what they would say. But like, as with the science trademark, science is what it was, even if you were late to discover it. How the world worked was what it was, even if you were late to the information, or you finally accepted it for what it was. It didn't rest upon you. You were the one that was getting it wrong initially. That's how it works. Tedros told reporters that the UN Health Agency based in Geneva is asking China to be transparent, open, and cooperate, especially on the information, raw data that we asked for at the early days of the pandemic. He said there had been a premature push to rule out the theory that the virus have escaped from a Chinese government lab in Wuhan, undermining WHO's own report back in March, which concluded that the laboratory leak was, quote and unquote, extremely unlikely. I was a lab technician myself. I'm an immunologist, and I have worked in the lab, and lab accidents happen. It's common. So that's interesting. So basically, it was a premature push, is what he's saying, for them to just say that, okay, it was just, look, it's not even something worth looking into because it's just so unlikely. And then it ain't as unlikely, is it? Again, say what you will. Maybe it's just complete corrupt up top to bottom, and that they knew that was a likely scenario, and they shouldn't have ruled it out, but they did it because, hey, man, we're talking about world governments, powerful entities. Definitely when you're dealing with the Chinese government, we're dealing with instances where there's a lot of money at play, and there's political power at play. So yeah, maybe he did know the entire time and just neglected, or WHO neglected to say it publicly. And now maybe because of the lack of cooperation, because they aren't playing ball like they expected them to do, they're just going to say what they're saying now. Again, the truth is the truth, regardless of whether you stumbled across it late. And this is why, for you guys who are so bent on, as it comes to this pandemic, all the media figures, the blue check marks, the people that, again, these your general leftists who fearmongers about the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the virus itself, who love to use this term misinformation and disinformation in the event that you question the damn government, any official narrative that they throw out there. The reason why removal, unwillingness to accept, or not necessarily accept, to even hear someone out for a very reasonable, likely scenario. And like, and what General Tedros is saying, that isn't unusual. You've heard this before by people that have worked within labs, like this whole idea that it could not have happened. Like, was just all it was to think that just had to have been ruled out from so early on was nonsense, because it was a very likely scenario, as in likely as in it could have happened. That's what I mean. Not saying that it did happen. I'm saying that to just completely dismiss it was a mistake. This is why it's important to get people, especially folks that have been learned on this, to be able to at least be part of the conversation. But that's not what you did, YouTube. So at what point do we hold these guys liable for that type of stuff? And by liable, I mean they were in on the jig, if you will, which is now up. The Facebooks of the world, the YouTubes of the world, that just completely removed anybody that said anything to the contrary. This is on you, because we could have been looking into this, figuring out what was going on, getting to the fucking bottom of it. But that's not what we did. Unfortunately, you were, again, complete removal. You didn't even want it to exist because it went against their narrative. You're a conspiracy theorist, not so much of a conspiracy anymore, because now even the organization that you said that we must listen to, they have now conceded that it was a premature push to just completely dismiss the idea of a laboratory leak in Wuhan when it came to COVID-19. These guys are fucking criminals, and that includes the damn WHO. Now I just get to say it, and I get to talk about this on the platform that most people are on when they get their video content. But all of you assholes who sat here and just immediately dismissed anybody that said anything to the contrary, you're still an asshole. Don't get me wrong. You're still an asshole. You're still one of those, because you were so hell bent or just listen to anything the government organizations told you that you weren't willing to listen to anything else that was opposite of it, antithetical to it. Or at minimum, it didn't even have to do that. All it needed to do was question. And you didn't want that. You said we need to be removing it because, well, the government officials, that's not what they're saying, so it must be wrong, right? Nope. Like I said, and I end on this one last time. The truth was always the truth. Just because you were late to stumble it does not mean that it then became the truth, which is what y'all would like to think, like, well, the science changed. No. Y'all were just getting it disastrously wrong very early. You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.